G'day Eagles fans, welcome back to True Eagles. It's time to sink our teeth into some draft stuff. The trade period has come and gone, and as I said in yesterday's video, we could still trade picks, and that little period where we can do that continues for a little bit longer, and of course there's live trading to do as well. But today I wanted to take a narrow look at the draft, particularly with a focus on having picks 1, 2, and another third rounder in what is currently pick 13, and talk about our general overall draft strategy and some of the players that I think are right for us and some of the players that I don't actually think are right for us. And I'll do my best to justify those opinions. If you do me a favor and subscribe to this channel, if you are someone who enjoys it, just looking through the analytics, it does appear that the people who watch the channel regularly is far larger than the people who are subscribed. So if you are enjoying it, I would just appreciate it if you chucked a subscribe on there for me, please. That would be fantastic. Obviously, it doesn't cost anything, and it just helps me grow the channel as well. All right, let's talk about this draft. It's a big one. This draft kind of represents the compensation we received for losing Oscar Allen, of course, at pick 2, but it's also the compensation we got for losing Tom Barras. Obviously, Hawthorn dealt in future picks, and this is really the draft where we received the payoff from making those decisions, or at least, if you want to call it making those decisions. Obviously, Oscar and Tom wanted to leave the club. In any case, it becomes really important for that reason. And obviously with our list position and the advent of Tasmania around the corner, there's a lot of pressure on this one in particular. The general feel of this draft is it's not as strong, certainly, as last year's. Sometimes drafts can be misread. I could be wrong, but I seem to remember 2019, that draft being talked about not as strong, and yet I think pound for pound it competes very well with 2018, which was considered a really strong draft. So people can be wrong about the way they read the depth of the draft, and players can surprise you. I think there's a lot of players here who maybe are not as rock solid as last year, but do have that upside. I'll go back to 2009 as an example. That was considered one of the weakest drafts, and probably still is when you look at the depth of the quality of players in that year, but it also produced Nat Fyfe and Dustin Martin that year. So all in all, it is still going to be an exciting draft for us, but I do have pretty strong views about the way we should go about this particular draft and the sorts of players I think we should target, because I think we have such glaring deficiencies that we didn't quite address during the trade period. In fact, some of those deficiencies got a little bit weaker, and therefore I do think we do need to consider what our team looks like next year, because I don't know about you guys, but I'm desperate to compete earlier than 2035, which is the way it feels like if you believe, well, at least the media anyway. So to clarify with that point, I do think we do need to have 2026 in mind with this particular draft as well, and therefore it doesn't feel like a good draft to go for your project tools or anything like that. There is some impetus for guys who can improve us next year. That doesn't mean you ignore best available, but we'll talk specifically. It's always more helpful to do that. So let's talk about pick 1. We've got pick 1 and we've got pick 2. Pick 1 does seem locked and loaded to be Willem Dersma, rather. And, I suppose my views on this is he's such a strongly considered consensus pick 1 that there's no real scenario where West Coast hold that pick on day 1 of the draft and don't go Willem Dersma. It would be malpractice to do that, because I think you could negotiate a trade outcome with Essendon and move down the order if you don't want Willem Dersma. But if you want Willem Dersma, you take him at pick 1. Is he the most suitable player for us? I'm not sure about that, but I don't think with pick 1 you mess around too much and reach for needs. I think you go for the highly touted prospect. And what does Willem Dersma bring to the West Coast Eagles? Well, he's I think the latest I read is 193 centimetres, which makes him the tallest of the 3 brothers. And what distinguishes him is, well, Zane's your more athletic third tall forward who can take a screamer and kick great goals. Willem's a little bit different to that. He's a bit more of at the moment, probably more of a back half running defender. There is some degree of expectation he could become a midfielder. At this point, he's just really athletic. Well, I guess to talk about his strengths, he's really strong aerially and a good intercept player from that point of view, which is why he has done some of his best work in the back half, playing as that rebounding player. He also provides really good run and carry, and that is probably one of the biggest features of his game. Aside from his overhead marking, his ability to just tuck the ball under the arm and really dash and get metres gained. His ball use, from what I can tell, I wouldn't say it's a strength, nor would I say it's a real glaring weakness from what I can tell. I think he's like, a number of players that we even have at West Coast, and I would include Harley Reid in this category. He's capable of hitting those really difficult high-end kicks where he kicks at 55 and laces it out. But I'd say on average, he does make mistakes, and that is probably very true of Harley Reid as well. I still like that about Harley's game, and that also applies to Willem Dersma here. Probably doesn't have that forward craft of a Zane, so I don't know if I ever see him as that kind of style of forward. So I think we're talking maybe early days, that behind the ball intercepting player who can run and dash. Now, if you look at West Coast Best 22, that's not really necessarily the biggest need we have. So it's more about what Willem can become. You probably don't want him to be an intercepting defender if you're going to take him with pick 1. Could he be that outside dashing midfielder? Possibly. I don't think he's the strongest contested player, but his ground ball game's really solid, and he could play that outside role and be exciting. And I think from a game plan point of view, if we're a team that's interested in enforcing turnovers and intercept marks, I think his aerial game will be very, very useful. So I think we can take this one to the bank, to be honest. I think Willem Dersma will be a West Coast Eagle at this point. I don't think there's too much doubt. I think Essendon could, try hard for him, but I wouldn't be surprised if West Coast say give us 5 and 6 and that's it. And I don't know if Essendon should do that, and therefore I won't predict it. So pick 2 probably brings more of the intrigue, I think, for the West Coast Eagles, because there's a decent gap between them then and our next pick at 13, and it's very hard to forecast who's going to be there at 13, which probably becomes something like 17 on the night as it currently stands. So, given that Willem Dersma is the best available pick, I feel like our needs need to be considered here. So, let's be clear on this. West Coast have 2 picks. There are only 4 possible players, in my opinion, as it currently stands, and I could be wrong. I'm not a draft expert, nor do I have inside knowledge. But I think there's only really 4 players West Coast should be considering with these 4 picks. Those include Willem Dersma, obviously, Cooper Duff-Tytler, the athletic forward ruck, Dyson Sharp, who was he was the Lark medalist, wasn't he? Either way, an exceptionally well-performed inside midfielder at the chance for SA, and Sullivan Roby, the enigmatic bolter in this year's draft. The reason I limit to these players, they're the only players I would rule out as being available at pick 7, pick 8. I think you have to pick one of these 4 if you're going to hold picks 1 and 2 and not trade them down. You've got to be interested in these players, in my opinion. Hope that makes sense. So let's talk about the players I just named. Let's start with Cooper Duff-Tytler. Probably one that is expected to be taken by us, or at least, one of those teams in the top bracket, but one of the more regularly linked to West Coast, I would say. There's arguments for and against this. Cooper Duff-Tytler, as a prospect, if you are expecting him to be a Luke Jackson athletic ruck, I don't know if that is a fair expectation on Cooper Duff-Tytler. To me, he's a 200 centimetre, really athletic ruck, and I'd say the feature of his game is that when the ball hits the deck, he becomes that extra midfielder, and he's very evasive and has really good ground ball skills. And there's great athleticism there. What he is not is a dominant tap ruckman, and I know that West Coast has glaring needs in this particular area, but if you are expecting him to be the answer to those woes from a tap point of view, he is not that player. For me, I think a comparison to somebody at West Coast is probably like an Archer Reid. Now, Cooper Duff-Tytler is a high level talent, I won't dispute that, but it's probably more that forward ruck role that you're looking to address with Cooper Duff-Tytler, and he's not going to be that Nat Nui number 1 ruck, nor is he going to be that Luke Jackson style ruckman, in my opinion. Now, I'm not a draft expert, I'm just giving you my honest opinion here, and I think therefore there is arguments for and against Cooper Duff-Tytler. I don't necessarily think he addresses our needs in the way that perhaps some are expecting. Could he be a very good player? Absolutely. But for me, I just don't think he is the right type of selection for West Coast. I think it's very team specific with Cooper Duff-Tytler, and I don't think we are one of those teams. So I would be personally disappointed if we paired Willem Dersma and Cooper Duff-Tytler, 2 players that just don't address our glaring list deficiencies. And I would say these list deficiencies that West Coast have, I've never seen a team so deficient in anything like West Coast are in terms of midfield game and anything forward of centre, really, to be honest. From a talent point of view, it makes sense. It wouldn't be a reach. It's just, is he right for us when you consider there's also players like Sharp and Roby available? Let's talk about Dyson Sharp. Now, if you're looking for that stoppage player, he is, certainly the best performed in this year's cohort. He is, he looks like a man already. He's well built. He's a contested beast. He's a really good tackler. That's a little bit different to saying he's quality at the two-way aspect of being a midfielder. And the difference is probably the leg speed. Can he really defend on transition? Maybe not. But there are plenty of midfielders that make it to a high level in the AFL that are very stoppage-centric, and we do have glaring stoppage deficiencies. Our ability to win the contested ball is really what I'm talking there, and generally win clearance. We are distantly last in the competition for that stat. Now, I think Dyson, with his ability to perform at Sandford level, as well as his dominance in the champs, I think he could actually impact fairly early from a stoppage point of view at West Coast. I actually don't think it would take him too long to get to that level. So that's the argument for Dyson Sharp, and I think suitability is right for him. I do have this lurking suspicion that if he doesn't go West Coast pick 2, he could still be available closer to pick 10, in my opinion, just because if you look at some of the other teams picking around this range, I don't know if Richmond would go there, having taken Josh Smiley last year. Then you've got Essendon, who do need an inside midfielder, but I also think they've spent early picks on Ben Hobbs and Elijah Sardis. And do they go back to the well? Maybe. Maybe they do, but there's also Ollie Greaves, the local talent that they might prefer. And then the Melbourne Football Club as well. Melbourne, it's a little bit harder to read. They may go a Dyson Sharp. It probably is a little bit different to a Harvey Langford in terms of style. But if we are entertaining the idea of a trade down, I wouldn't go further than Melbourne's picks anyway. So that's just the read on Dyson Sharp's range in the draft. And we may keep it simple and just go, no, this is the right guy for us. Let's draft him here. The only little argument against Dyson Sharp here is the way the game's being played. We are continually seeing these inside dominant stoppage players who probably don't defend so well on transition and get burnt a little bit for leg speed, phased out of the game. We've just seen Jack Steele a few years ago as one of the best players in the competition, now traded for nothing to get to the Melbourne Footy Club. We've seen Clayton Oliver's form take a dive. Jack McRae as well, pushed out of the Western Bulldogs. I guess what I'm saying there is not so much my own personal opinion about Dyson Sharp's longevity, but you also consider that West Coast, their philosophy of drafting, we don't seem too stoppage focused, to be honest. We seem a lot more scores from turnover focused, if that makes sense. So would we go for that kind of player with pick 2 is the part that I'm questioning. And it's not a talent question with Dyson Sharp. I think he is very, very talented. And for every Jack Steele and Clayton Oliver and whoever else, I reckon you can find more. I didn't think about it that deeply. There's still Lachie Neale, who won the Brownlow 2 years ago. There's Patrick Cripps, who, again, I wouldn't call him a limited player, Patrick Cripps, but still that kind of stoppage-focused player. So I'm just curious what West Coast are thinking with this particular pick, considering we have other avenues to get cheaper stoppage-style players who are not as good as Dyson Sharp into the list. Would we take the opportunity to go the more dynamic player? So let's talk about Sullivan Roby here. He's, again, an enigma in this year's draft because he bolted from nowhere. He started the year playing local footy. And I don't know if this is true or a little bit of rumour mill and things getting exaggerated, but I heard that he started the year at about 176 centimetres tall. He's now 192 centimetres tall, and that is why he didn't get picked for Coates Talent League games. He didn't play in the champs, and then he gets an opportunity with the Eastern Rangers and puts together an unbelievable 10 weeks that has seen him bolt into top 5 calculations and probably ranked around that 7 to 8 mark in a lot of rankings that I've seen here. But there has been a suggestion that Richmond like him. So again, I would put them in the category of, if you want Sullivan Roby, it has to be at pick 2. He won't be there at 7 or 8 if you trade down, hypothetically. And I keep going to Melbourne as an example there. But even 5 and 6, if we traded with Essendon, don't think Sullivan Roby's there. So we have to consider him here if we want him at all. He is a very exciting looking player, and I do think may appeal to West Coast a little bit more. The obvious downside is the lack of proven form. He's just done it at Coates Talent League level, and we do like to see these players dominate at the champs before spending early picks on them, usually, or at least at a higher level. But the physical development of him and his trajectory, it's a little bit of an outlier, to be honest, and hard to compare because he was a small forward and now he's a dynamic forward midfielder. He is, he's proven that he can be high volume. He's had games where he's had 40 possessions and he's kicked 3 goals. He's clearly a good forward. He kicked 4 goals in the Coates Talent League Grand Final. There is a sense that he can really step up and play in big games. And I think these sort of abstract or intangible concepts will really elevate a player's ranking. I think this one probably suits West Coast the most in what we're trying to do because he is a quality stoppage player. His ball use is probably his weakness, but none of the players really at the pointy end of this draft have elite ball use, so it's kind of much of a muchness for me. He's got a good overhead game. He's got a decent set shot game. He kicks goals regularly. This is the guy I probably kind of am leaning towards for West Coast, whilst acknowledging the small sample size of form does also need to come into consideration here for Sullivan Roby. So for me, I'm thinking if West Coast hold picks 1 and 2 on the night and we don't trade them, I think Dersma goes pick 1. And I think I'd be happy with Dyson Sharp or Sullivan Roby at pick 2. Now we can explore the possibility of trading down to 7 and 8, and I don't mind this call because, as much as you lose pick 2, I don't know if the opportunity cost of missing out on that group of players with our second pick is greater than the benefit we would have of picking another player in the top 10 of this year's draft, because I think those players might be more suitable to our needs. I'm going to throw some at you, and as we get closer to the draft, more and more names will come into the mix, and we'll get a better feel of the general rankings and what's realistic for West Coast. We'll also know if we've traded down, which at this point we haven't. But perhaps these players I mentioned here could be available at 13. Let's talk about Lockie Doveston. He is the premier small forward in this year's draft. Again, he can win plenty of the footy. He can kick goals and, again, perform well for the Eastern Rangers. So he's a Sullivan and Roby teammate as well. And I think suits our needs really, really well. There is also Tyler Williams in this year's draft, who is our next generation academy talent who may get bid on sometime after pick 20, they think, which is, he's clearly bolted in calculations. He had a really good draft combine. But I think West Coast small to medium forward situation is so dire, even though we have plenty of them, that I don't think Tyler Williams is enough, to be honest. And I think Lockie Doveston is a lot more prolific. And there are similarities to Nick Watson there. I think Nick Watson has more weapons and probably proven himself in at a higher level across multiple positions. Nick Watson dominated on a half-back flank in his draft year as well. So he's not quite the same player, but he's exciting. He kicks goals, and we do need players who can generate scoring opportunities, because I'm looking at Tyler Brockman, Noah Long, Matthew Owies, with Liam Ryan out of the side next year and Jamie Cripps 34. I mean, this is now suddenly the best we have. And I think there's an opportunity for Tyler Williams and Lockie Doveston to fit into the team fairly early next year. So I'm going to throw Doveston out there as a contender. Don't think he's there at 13. So we'd need an opportunity to get pick 7 or 8, for instance, to draft him. But I'm going to put him right at the top of my interested list, which is a weird way to say that. Sam Cummings, another one. Sam Cummings is a dynamic midfielder. Again, distinctly different from Dyson Sharp, probably a little bit more of a forward threat, but what he and Dyson have in common is that they're good stoppage players. Sam Cummings good overhead as well, and they both perform well at SANFL level. With Sam Cummings as well, he did get injured not long after playing in the SANFL. I think he played a couple of games there, if I'm not mistaken. Missed the end of the season with a shoulder injury, so that probably took him out of contention for pick 2. But again, this is probably exploring the possibility that he's there at 7 or 8 if we have one of those picks. These are the guys that I think are suitable for West Coast, but of course come with some risk. I think we saw enough from Sam Cumming to suggest he's a good player. I'm not too concerned by the fact he didn't play out the rest of the season. Let's also talk about Jacob Farrow, because he is the best West Australian rated talent in this year's draft, and I actually do think comes right into the mix at pick 13, which likely becomes pick 17 on the night. I think it's distinctly possible Jacob Farrow is there, and we do like our local boys. As a side note, I read that West Coast only has 2 players from Vic Metro on their list, and they were both picked in the 40s. That is Tom Gross and Harvey Johnston. That is incredible, actually, when you consider a long history there, or a long recent history rather. Every player on the list, only 2 of them are from Vic Metro. That kind of works against the idea of Lockie Doveston and, of course, Sullivan Roby as well. Willem Dersma is a Vic country boy from Gippsland, by the way. But let's talk about Farrow. Farrow has been compared to Hayden Young as a prospect. He is a very high volume, sort of rebounding defender with really good foot skills. And he looks like a quality player. The difference between him and Hayden Young is Hayden Young now has to be considered a midfielder. And it's probably more Hayden Young at that age and probably less proven as well. Hayden Young was a very, very strong prospect at 18 and probably shades Jacob Farrow. But his kicking is a feature and he's got a pretty good contested game. But is he a stoppage player? Because we needed to consider if Jacob Farrow is merely a running defender, having taken Bo Allen last year, who could still go either way, having just taken Brandon Starcevic, having taken Jinby at pick 9 in 2022, and trading in Liam Baker, I do think that even though, yes, to Farrow from a talent point of view, does he fit West Coast needs? So to map out like a worst case scenario from this draft, I think if West Coast, went Willem Dersma, Cooper Duff Tytler, and Jacob Farrow, I would be having real nightmares about what next season looks like. And I do think, even though they're 18-year-old prospects, if we picked different players, genuine midfielders / small forwards can influence the competition a little bit earlier than, say, a project forward ruck, for instance. That would probably be my worst case scenario from a balance point of view, because we'd just be strengthening things that are not glaring weaknesses, at least relatively speaking, and we won't be addressing what we really need, which is potency, some stoppage craft, some contested game as well, and the ability to actually hurt teams when we win the ball back, because we have gotten good now at winning the ball back, particularly in the forward half when we play our best footy, when we play our team brand, and that was on show for chunks of this year. Then we can actually be hard to play against, but we do absolutely fuck all when we get the ball. Excuse my language. I went back and watched a few game reviews early this year and really tapped back into my frustration of watching the Eagles through periods of this season. So I think that is all I got for you in terms of the guys that I'm considering and right for West Coast at the moment. I have fairly firm views, but they're firm views loosely held, as they say. That's the way you got to hold your opinions, right? Which means I can change my mind and we'll see, but that's the way I'm currently feeling. So let me know in the comments what you think. Give me some ideas for other things you want me to talk about on this channel, and naturally as we get closer to the draft, we'll really flesh out all our different options and permutations and players we might end up with. By the way, I think Charlie Banfield is going to be a bit of a gun, and I'm really happy we will likely get him in this year's national draft. But let me know in the comments what you think. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Up the Eagles.